Ethan and Marissa Caldwell were the couple everyone admired. He, a respected architect with a calm demeanor, she, a brilliant marketing executive with a magnetic charm. To outsiders, their marriage was the definition of perfection. But behind the polished smiles and Instagram-wealthy vacations, a single lie festered. One so devastating that when the truth came to light, it not only shattered their seemingly flawless union, but led to a discovery so dark, it led an entire community stunned. From the outside looking in, Ethan and Marissa Caldwell were the embodiment of a perfect marriage. Their lives were clean, composed, and seemingly effortless, like a well-curated magazine spread come to life. They lived in a beautiful two-story craftsman home, nestled in one of Seattle's most picturesque neighborhoods. Their landscaping was pristine, their home filled with warm lighting and tasteful art. Marissa's garden was the envy of every neighbor, blooming year-round with flowers arranged in symmetrical rows, reflecting the kind of order that seemed to define every aspect of their life. Ethan was a rising star in the world of finance. With a background in investment strategy, he had worked his way up from modest beginnings to become one of the top advisors at a respected firm. He was known for his calm demeanor, his tailored suits, and his impeccable punctuality. Clients trusted him, colleagues respected him, and many younger professionals admired his drive and quiet confidence. He often worked late, but he never missed a major holiday or anniversary. Marissa, his wife of 9 years, was just as impressive in her own right. She taught English literature at a local high school, where her students adored her and parents spoke highly of her warmth and dedication. She had a soft voice, always composed, and carried herself with a kind of grace that never sought attention but never failed to earn it. They were the kind of couple that seemed to have figured life out. Every detail about them, how they dressed, how they spoke to each other, how they hosted, exuded harmony. At dinner parties, Ethan would prepare cocktails with precision, while Marissa floated from guest to guest, making everyone feel at home. They traveled to Europe every summer, volunteered at local shelters on weekends, and attended church regularly. There were no visible cracks, no dramatic outbursts, no gossip, no scandal. Even their social media presence was pristine, filtered but not flashy, curated but not cold. But behind closed doors, their life was governed by a quiet, strict routine. Ethan liked things a certain way. He followed a morning schedule that never changed. His clothes were arranged by color and style. The kitchen counters had to be spotless. Marissa, always the more flexible of the two, adapted to his habits. She woke early, prepared his green smoothie, laid out his watch, and reviewed her lesson plans while he scrolled through financial reports. She made few demands, rarely complained, and always seemed to be accommodating. Friends often remarked on how in sync the couple was, unaware that much of that harmony was enforced by subtle expectations and invisible rules. Over time, some of Marissa's friends noticed that she'd become quieter. She canceled more coffee dates, avoided extended phone calls, and seemed increasingly absent in group chats. When asked, she would say she was just busy, preparing for parent-teacher conferences or grading papers. No one pressed her. After all, she was married to Ethan Caldwell. What could possibly be wrong? Ethan, on the other hand, maintained his public image flawlessly. He remained social, helpful, and disciplined. But he also grew more private, turning down work functions more frequently and avoiding casual conversations with colleagues. He spoke about Marissa in glowing terms, occasionally mentioning plans to start a family, though those plans never seemed to materialize. The more he spoke, the more he seemed to paint an idealized version of their life, a version no one ever questioned. In the fall of their 9th year of marriage, something shifted. Marissa started keeping a notebook that she never left in the house. She took longer walks alone, and sometimes drove out of town without telling anyone. Ethan noticed these changes but didn't speak about them. If they had arguments, no one ever heard them. If there were secrets, they were buried deep beneath the surface of their glossy, enviable life. Then, one rainy Tuesday morning, Marissa didn't show up for work. Her co-workers thought she might be sick. Her principal called her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. That evening, Ethan called the police and reported his wife missing. The story stunned everyone, because if this couple wasn't safe from secrets, what hope did anyone else have? Marissa's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. She wasn't the kind of person to simply vanish without a trace. Her life was predictable, her routine structured, and she rarely deviated from her plans without letting someone know. When she didn't show up for work that Tuesday morning, her colleagues were immediately concerned. Marissa had never missed a day of school without prior notice. Her desk sat untouched, her chair neatly pushed in, and there were no signs of anything unusual in her classroom. At first, some assumed she might be unwell or had a family emergency, but as the hours passed, the sense of worry deepened. When the school couldn't reach her by phone and emails went unanswered, her principal contacted Ethan. That same evening, Ethan called the police and filed a missing persons report. He told officers that he'd last seen Marissa early that morning. According to him, she had left the house around 6:45 a.m., as she always did, wearing a blue trench coat and carrying her usual brown leather bag. He said there was nothing out of the ordinary, no fight, no signs of distress, just a normal day. Except she never made it to school. Authorities quickly began their investigation. Within hours, Marissa's car was found just a few blocks from the school, parked neatly along a quiet residential street. The driver's door was locked, and nothing appeared to be disturbed. Inside the vehicle, police found her handbag resting on the passenger seat. Her phone, wallet, and ID were all there. Her keys were in the ignition, but the car hadn't been started. The setting was strange, calm and untouched, as though she had simply stepped out and disappeared into thin air. There were no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints that shouldn't have been there, and no eyewitnesses to speak of. The story spread quickly across news outlets and social media. "Beloved teacher missing" headlines ran alongside smiling photos of Marissa, often paired with pictures of her and Ethan at community events or on vacation. Friends and neighbors organized search parties, walking the surrounding neighborhoods, checking nearby parks, alleys, and empty buildings. Flyers went up in coffee shops and grocery stores. Ethan appeared at several public vigils, speaking softly and tearfully, asking anyone with information to come forward. To many watching, he appeared to be a grieving husband clinging to hope. But to the investigators working behind the scenes, something about his behavior didn't sit quite right. Detectives began probing deeper into Ethan and Marissa's personal lives. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Financial stability, no criminal history, no domestic complaints. But when investigators requested access to Marissa's digital records, things started to shift. The first red flag appeared in her bank account. Just 3 weeks before she vanished, Marissa had withdrawn $9,200.00 in cash. The transaction was done in person, not at an ATM, and the bank teller remembered her. She had seemed calm but serious, declining any small talk. Ethan claimed he had no knowledge of the transaction and was confused as to why she would withdraw such a large amount of money. He suggested it might have been for a surprise gift or a charitable donation, but there was no trace of where that money had gone. When detectives reviewed security footage from the couple's home, they discovered something else strange. Marissa had stopped using the main door entrance weeks earlier. She had been leaving and entering through the garage using a spare key hidden under the side paneling. It was subtle but deliberate. Ethan said he hadn't noticed. Police weren't convinced. The real breakthrough came when they searched Marissa's classroom. In the bottom drawer of her locked filing cabinet, behind stacks of lesson plans, was a small flash drive. The cabinet wasn't tampered with, and no one would have found it unless they knew exactly where to look. When investigators opened the flash drive, they discovered folders filled with images, documents, and notes. It was a private archive, one that hinted at something far more complex than a simple missing persons case. This wasn't just a woman who had disappeared. This was someone who had been preparing for something. Suddenly, The search for Marissa Caldwell turned into something else entirely, something darker, something far more calculated than anyone had imagined. The contents of the flash drive changed the entire direction of the investigation. Hidden behind innocuous folder names like reading plans and school reports were hundreds of files Marissa had quietly collected over the past year. Some were screenshots of emails, others were bank statements, travel receipts, and even blurry photos of unfamiliar women. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became that Marissa had been documenting something she had suspected for a long time. Her husband was living a double life. One folder, dated 6 months prior to her disappearance, contained emails between Ethan and a woman named Claire Winslow. The tone was intimate, affectionate, and familiar. The conversations didn't read like a recent affair, but more like an ongoing relationship, one that had already weathered time. Marissa had saved each email, many with timestamps overlapping weekends Ethan had claimed to be working late or away on business. Another folder contained photos of Ethan and Claire at a lake resort in Montana. They appeared relaxed and happy. In one photo, Ethan's arm was around Claire as she leaned into his chest, clearly unaware that the photo was being taken from a distance. There were even photos of Claire with a young child, a boy who looked no older than 4. Marissa had circled the boy's face in red and added a typed note, "Check birth certificate, looks just like Ethan." As the investigators reviewed the files, it became clear that Marissa hadn't simply discovered an affair. She had begun building a quiet case, piecing together the evidence herself. One note listed dates, hotel names, and phone numbers. Another described a confrontation she had with Ethan weeks earlier, writing, "He denied everything, said I was being paranoid. But he didn't look me in the eye once." There was also mention of a DNA test. Marissa had apparently sent away a toothbrush Ethan had used to a private lab, along with a hair sample taken from the boy's discarded toy found in a trash can outside Claire's residence. The results were inconclusive due to contamination, but the note beside the file read, "Try again, use different sample." The flash drive also included a folder titled Legal, which contained scanned copies of divorce papers Marissa had begun drafting with a local attorney. The forms were never filed. Investigators reached out to the attorney listed in the documents, who confirmed that Marissa had come in for a consultation but never returned. The meeting took place 2 weeks before she vanished. What puzzled detectives was Marissa's decision to stay silent. She had discovered the betrayal, gathered the evidence, even considered legal action, yet she remained in the home with Ethan. It was a dangerous game, especially with someone who now seemed increasingly untrustworthy. Some investigators theorized she was preparing to confront him once she had everything in place. Others believed she might have been planning to disappear and start over quietly. But if that was her plan, something had clearly gone wrong. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior began to unravel under the weight of the investigation. In the days following the discovery of the flash drive, his demeanor changed. He became more withdrawn, skipped media interviews, and declined to attend additional vigils. When detectives asked to search the Caldwell home again, Ethan reluctantly agreed. During the second search, they found Marissa's second cell phone, one Ethan claimed he didn't know existed, tucked behind a loose panel under the bathroom sink. It was also located at the same time. It had been wiped clean. Forensic teams began recovering deleted files, uncovering even more details about her investigation into Ethan's affair. The device had last connected to Wi-Fi at a motel located 45 miles outside of Seattle, just days before she vanished. Surveillance footage from the motel showed Marissa checking in alone under a fake name. She stayed only 2 hours before checking out. She carried a single duffel bag and appeared calm. No one followed her in or out, and no car was registered to her name at the location. The mystery deepened. If she was planning to leave, why would she return home? Ethan maintained his innocence, insisting he had no knowledge of the affair or her private investigation. But the evidence was stacking up. The story had evolved from the disappearance of a devoted wife into something far more sinister. Marissa hadn't just vanished. She had been watching, waiting, planning, and now she was gone. The discovery of Marissa's second phone and the flash drive had dramatically shifted the public's perception of Ethan Caldwell. What once looked like the tragic disappearance of a beloved wife now appeared to be the aftermath of something calculated and secretive. As detectives peeled back more layers, one thing became increasingly clear. Marissa hadn't just stumbled upon a betrayal. She had been preparing for a reckoning. Investigators obtained a warrant to dig deeper into Ethan's financial records, specifically transactions linked to the affair and possible motivations for harm. That's when they uncovered a life insurance policy on Marissa worth $750,000, 0 cents. The policy had been taken out 2 years earlier, but what stood out was that it had recently been updated. Just 3 months before she vanished, Ethan had made changes to the beneficiaries and confirmed new contact details. The change wasn't suspicious on its own, but when placed alongside the timing of her disappearance, the hidden affair, and the failed DNA test, it raised serious questions. Detectives interviewed Claire Winslow. At first, she denied any involvement with Ethan, calling him an old friend, but confronted with the photos and emails, she admitted they had been romantically involved for over 5 years, long before Ethan and Marissa even married. Claire seemed genuinely shaken when she learned Marissa had been investigating them. She also admitted that Ethan had promised to leave Marissa soon and had often spoken about wanting to start fresh and raise his son without complications. It wasn't just an affair, it was a parallel life. The case grew darker when forensics completed their analysis of the Caldwell home. Luminol testing in the garage revealed faint traces of blood near the water heater. It had been scrubbed, but not thoroughly enough. The blood sample was a match for Marissa. Ethan claimed he had no idea how it got there. He insisted that Marissa sometimes did minor home repairs and might have accidentally cut herself. The explanation was weak and unconvincing. Police had no proof of foul play, but the circumstantial evidence was now painting a disturbing picture. Then came the anonymous tip. A week after the press reported the blood discovery, a letter was dropped off at the police station in an unmarked envelope. It had no return address and was typed, not handwritten. The message was short. Check the rental cabin near Blue Ridge Trail, northwest side. It's not as clean as he thinks. Investigators scrambled to identify the location. After cross-referencing Ethan's past travel logs, credit card receipts, and local rental property databases, they found a match. An isolated Airbnb he had booked under a fake name 2 days before Marissa vanished. Detectives arrived at the cabin and immediately noticed something strange. The rental appeared untouched, as if no one had used it. But hidden beneath the floorboards in a crawl space under the bed, they found a pair of muddy hiking boots and a blood-stained jacket. The jacket matched the one Marissa was last seen wearing, confirmed later by her sister. DNA testing would take time, but investigators were no longer asking if Ethan was involved. They were now asking how he managed to keep it hidden for so long. With mounting pressure, Ethan was brought in for further questioning. His answers became vague, and he showed signs of stress. Surveillance footage, financial motives, a secret affair, trace blood, and now a possible crime scene were all leading in one direction. But without a body, it was still a missing persons case. That changed when cadaver dogs were brought to the cabin. Just 200 yards from the property, in a shallow, freshly covered ditch beneath an outcropping of trees, investigators made the grim discovery. Marissa's remains were wrapped in a tarp, buried hastily. The autopsy revealed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. There were no defensive wounds, indicating she may have been struck from behind. The timeline aligned with the morning she supposedly left for work. Her Fitbit, found still strapped to her wrist, showed her heart rate spiked around 6:39 a.m. AEM, then stopped abruptly. The evidence had spoken. What started as a love story, admired by many, had spiraled into a cold and calculated tragedy. One lie had opened the door to deception. And from there, everything crumbled. Ethan was arrested that same evening and charged with murder. The arrest of Ethan Caldwell sent shockwaves through the entire community. The man who had once been held up as a role model of commitment and stability was now in handcuffs, accused of the brutal murder of his wife. The media descended upon Seattle, and the story dominated headlines. Neighbors, friends, and former colleagues were stunned. Many couldn't reconcile the Ethan they knew with the man being described in court documents. But as prosecutors laid out the facts, the picture became impossible to ignore. Prosecutors alleged that Ethan had been planning the murder for weeks, if not months. The changes to the life insurance policy, the booking of the secluded cabin under a false identity, and the extensive efforts to hide his affair all pointed to premeditation. The tipping point appeared to come when Marissa began gathering evidence and seeking legal counsel. Ethan had realized that his double life was at risk of being exposed. Not only would he lose his carefully constructed image, but also potentially face a costly and humiliating divorce, custody battles, and the destruction of his second relationship. In his eyes, removing Marissa was the only way to maintain control. The trial began 6 months after Ethan's arrest. The courtroom was packed every day, with reporters filling the gallery and spectators lining up outside to get a glimpse of the proceedings. The prosecution laid out a devastating sequence of events. They showed emails that indicated Ethan's growing frustration with Marissa. They presented testimony from Marissa's attorney, who confirmed that she had scheduled a follow-up meeting to file the divorce. The forensic team walked the jury through the blood found in the garage and the jacket hidden beneath the cabin floor. Most damning of all was the testimony from Claire Winslow, who admitted under oath that Ethan told her, just days before Marissa disappeared, that things would be taken care of soon. Ethan's defense team painted a very different picture. They argued that the affair, while regrettable, was not proof of murder. They claimed the blood found in the garage could have resulted from an old injury, and they questioned the legitimacy of the anonymous tip. The defense tried to raise doubts about the chain of custody of the evidence, the interpretation of the timeline, and the credibility of the digital documents Marissa had saved. But the tide had turned. The jury could see through the smokescreen. One of the final blows to Ethan's defense came from a digital forensics expert, who testified that Ethan had accessed the flash drive just hours after Marissa vanished. The files were opened, and some were even renamed, suggesting he was not only aware of her investigation, but actively trying to alter or hide the contents. It was a key detail that prosecutors argued showed consciousness of guilt. He knew what Marissa had discovered, and he knew it could destroy him. The jury deliberated for only 2 days before returning a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Ethan showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Marissa's family, the verdict offered a measure of closure, but not peace. Her parents spoke at the sentencing, describing the pain of losing their daughter in such a cruel, calculated way. They spoke of her intelligence, her kindness, and her strength, even in the final months of her life, as she quietly sought the truth. In the aftermath, the case became a cautionary tale, one discussed in true crime circles, classrooms, and community groups. A podcast series examined the psychological profile of Ethan Caldwell, speculating on how someone so seemingly normal could orchestrate such darkness. A documentary followed, titled Behind the Smile: The Marissa Caldwell Story, which explored the contrast between the image Ethan presented to the world and the reality Marissa uncovered. Her story lived on, not just as a tragedy, but as a testament to intuition, courage, and the quiet strength it takes to confront betrayal. Marissa had sensed something was wrong. She had followed the clues, Even as the man beside her lied with a steady voice and a calm face, in the end, it wasn't just one lie that destroyed everything. It was the refusal to accept the truth. And that truth, once uncovered, exposed the terrifying cost of silence.